All right. Well, we got just a few of us here, and so I still think that a couple more might jump on. But and Raina is listening, and Trish is on here, and so Raina and Trish, this is Joe. He's again the sports director for the Johnson City Press and the Kingsport-Times News. And Joe, I appreciate you taking the time just to have this quick conversation in these really challenging times that we're undergoing. And so just kind of start talking to us a little bit about
Okay.
what this is for you.
Well, like I told Don earlier, and I was going to say to you guys when Don originally asked me to do this, has all gone out the window because, as you know, the whole world has changed in the past month. And it's hard to imagine what we're going through in the sports department because the minute they stopped playing games, people thought the sports. Am I frozen up now or not?
Nope, you're good. Go. Keep going.
Okay. Everyone thought the sports page would kind of dry up and go away because they weren't playing games. And it was just gave us a little challenge. And before we got to that point, I got my staff together and said, I need 20 or 30 feature ideas from every one of you that we can do immediately. And they all gave me this, and I printed out this big list, and I went into a big operations meeting. And before they even asked, I said, this is what we got planned. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this. And we're going to give the readers more of a reason to read the sports page than they ever have. And we've actually done that, and people have commented on that. We've done features on athletes, on coaches, on scorekeepers, and it's stories about people more than games. And, it's really, that's the stuff that makes sports go. It's the people. And we've gotten to the point where even when the games come back, we're going to attack the sports coverage a little bit more along this line because it's been so popular. I see new people coming in. I'm just telling everybody about how the way we cover the sports world has changed with no games. We've become feature writers, and we've become better writers and more interesting work. Actually, right now, it's a little challenging to come up with the ideas, but I think everybody on my staff has 20 or 30 of them in the bank right now, and we're pumping them out. And with no time element, we're used to working on deadline. When I cover an ETSU game, it's not unusual for the game to end at 9:20 and for the interviews to end at 9:45. And I have to have my story in by 10 o'clock. That story, pictures, and video in by 10 o'clock. So without this deadline pressure, we're able to write these features any time of the day. I write several a day. I get ahead of the game. I have them in the system. We're shooting for seven stories a week per person, and you can write them anytime you want. If you want to, get your 40 hours in 3 days. I mean, that's just the way it is. Because right now we're working at home and we're basically being judged on our production. And my staff has been absolutely incredible with coming up with these stories. Like I said, we're going to. It's going to change the way we cover the sports world, the local high school and college sports world in the future. I could see us have game stories, especially on the high school level, and more in-depth features about what people like to do off the field, off the court, and other hobbies, other interests. Because like I was saying when some of you came in, it's the people that really that drive the sports world, the people that play the games, that coach the games, that officiate the games, the administrators, that kind of stuff. And honestly, I mean, everybody hates what's going on right now, but it's given us a challenge. And right now, from what we hear in response emails and from what our higher ups are saying and corporate offices, we're rising to the challenge and we're meeting it. So I think that's just the way things have changed. And I got to be honest with you, I never thought I'd be doing something like we're doing right now. When I started my career, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, I was using a manual typewriter and literally typing a story, a piece of paper, ripping it out of the thing and giving it to somebody who would, at that point, do something with it. I don't even know. My first college basketball assignments, I didn't even have a typewriter. I was covering the games in Green Bay, Wisconsin, for Wisconsin Green Bay, their first year in Division I basketball. And when the game was over, I had 5 minutes to run to the payphone and call the office in Milwaukee and dictate a story 5 minutes after the game was over. So that'll teach you to write quick on deadline. Nowadays, we have a few more tools at our disposal, and it's amazing how the world has changed. That being said, all those changes in all those years, I don't think even that adds up to what's gone on in the past month. So, I know I've said a million things right there really fast. Any questions or any feedback?
Yeah. Kind of you have kind of a unique perspective. Kind of take us through the timeline of how this. I know it's kind of probably a blur, and your reactions as it was. Again, it's been about 3 weeks, about a month now.
A month. Yep.
From the,
from
because
the end of the Southern Conference.
Because before everybody got on here, I was talking about how one of our last big gatherings was the Bucks winning the Southern Conference championship. I mean, kind of talk from that time through the timeline of this.
We knew it was coming because even then there was no social distancing yet, but everybody they weren't shaking hands. Some people were. A guy from one of the media outlets walked by me in Asheville and tried to give me a fist bump, and I went, "Oh, sorry, I don't do that anymore." We were still banging elbows to each other and washing our hands a lot. I remember going to that restroom in Asheville, just continually washing our hands. That being said, there was 6,000 people in that arena that night. And, it was pretty packed all weekend. And we left there with ETSU knowing they were going to the NCAA tournament. They had planned a party the following Sunday at the Carnegie for Selection Sunday. And that was going to be open to all the fans now that championship game was on Monday night. Mm-hmm. By Wednesday, the plan was the team was going to watch Selection Sunday in the locker room by themselves with no public and no media. They were going to come outside and talk to us. So you were going to already lose that element of excitement from the fans interacting with the players. Then we heard they were talking about postponing the tournament. They were hoping maybe postpone it for a month and try to play it. Then when the word came out that they had just canceled it, it was just a crusher to everybody. I mean, I called some fans to get some reactions, and smartly the fans said as bad as they felt worse for the athletes. I mean, those guys, you got to remember, those guys, the seniors are 22, 23 years old. They worked their entire lives for that one moment, and they did it on Monday night, and then 3 days later it's gone. And how can you feel? I know, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So as far as our job, though, it just kept getting worse every day. I don't remember what night, but I was watching something on ESPN Plus, and I got a text about the NBA maybe going to shut down. So we quickly turned on ESPN, and there was an NBA game on, and they started talking about what was going on, the player on the Jazz who had tested positive, and it just snowballed from there. Right about then is when I formulated that plan for our sports section, because at that point we were afraid for our jobs. We thought they were going to start laying people off. They're going to say, we don't need a sports page anymore. So I told my guys, you guys need to prove you're relevant. And now's the time. I mean, we really have been kind of treated as the toy department of the newspaper. And we are. It's fun and games. But, things got serious. We had serious stuff to report about cancellations, postponements, reactions, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And some of the high schools kept playing a little bit longer than maybe they should have. And as you all know now, everything shut down, just everything.
When did it kind of start to be that you guys had to start working from home?
Last week, I was in the office last Monday, so that's a week ago. And we were being told we were allowed to work from home. And I said, well, do we have to? They said, no. I said, well, I like coming in because I get so much more done here. I have 4 dogs, 3 of them are really big, and they require a lot of attention, and they demand a lot of attention when I'm here. So, but then we got an email later in the day. We were highly, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, they wanted us to work from home. So I've started working from home.
Highly encouraged, I guess.
Last Tuesday. That was the word, yes. And when you're highly encouraged about something from your boss, it's not a request. So I've been working from home for a week now. It'll be for Tuesday.
And how do you stay in touch with the other sports writers and other people from the Johnson City Press and Kingsport-Times News?
Well, obviously, it's a lot of email. We have a folder in Google Drive where we keep story ideas and a daily budget on what's coming.
Nice.
So the reporters are required to put what story they have coming that day on that budget. And then I go through the list of stories and separate them, which ones are going to the Johnson City Press and which ones are going to the Times News. So I send each desk an email every day, what's coming, and it's worked out okay. And the working from home part isn't that hard right now because all these stories are right in our features. And, you know, you call somebody, you text somebody, you send them a Facebook message. And it used to be we were probably less than 50-50 on getting a hold of people right away. But these days, it's amazing how easy it is to get a hold of people because people are home. They stay home. They're not doing much. So,
yeah.
I mean, I got a hold of TJ Cromer. He was playing basketball in Italy. This story on him. This story on an ETSU soccer player who's playing for Minnesota United now. That was in today's paper. You know, everybody's available. That's what's made it kind of easy for us. So that's been pretty good.
Yeah. Do we have some other questions? I'm sure I have some more, but let's see if somebody else wanted to ask.
Well, I'll tell you another thing while they're thinking. Because there's no games and we're writing these features, we've had to kind of invent, come up with ideas, and we're kind of inventing stories. For example, in the Times News in Kingsport, starting tomorrow, we're running a 5-day series on the top football players from Dobbins-Bennett High School for each decade. We had some former coaches and people help us pick these teams, and those are the kind of things that are good because the people will read it. And not everybody's going to agree with it. It's going to create some conversation. Of course, everyone thing like that creates some of the conversation you don't want when they start calling you a freaking idiot and that kind of stuff. But that's okay. As long as you're reading, that's good. And that's the kind of story that we might not have had time to work on if we were covering so many games. So that's pretty good. I've been working on a story for a really long time, for a whole week. And usually I don't spend a week on a story because in the daily grind of a daily newspapers, you got to pump something out each day. But I covered the Masters for 17 years. And I started thinking about my favorite Masters moments, experiences. It's not the greatest moments in Masters history or anything like that. They were just my experiences. And they were from everything from waking up Ernie Els from a nap during a rain delay once to having Gary Player make fun of me once. And the amazing thing was when I came through the list, not one of them involved Tiger Woods. That's kind of interesting. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff we're writing. And you can appreciate this because you know how this works. But that story is approaching 100 inches.
Oh, wow.
My usual column is 18 inches. So the desk has not been warned of that yet. But there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of choice words for me on Wednesday night to get that story.
So I guess the folks in Kingsport, which is where the I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that's where both of the newspapers are put together. Is that right?
Yeah,
so
they're both.
I guess they're still going in then.
They have to. They have to. Yeah. And you know, their desks are close together, so I wonder if they spread out. I mean, you can't move the desks; they're all like cubby holes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what they've done, but they do have to go to work.
Yeah. Well, you know, those are some more of those essential employees, and it's just like that list of essential employees. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we might.
Well, the list of essential activities is kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I've actually read the governor's executive order, and if you read directly what some of it says, it almost says basically you are ordered to stay at home unless you don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Pretty
really
much.
does.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played golf.
Yeah.
I played golf, and golf is an essential recreational activity. Of course, I already knew that, but the governor told me that.
So I guess the
I've never
golf courses.
seen,
So the golf courses have still been going, then I guess, right?
they're still going. You know, I've never seen hygiene practice on the golf course before, and it's amazing
Yeah.
what this will do to you now. I mean, it's amazing.
One other question I wanted to ask is, you talked about, you said that this is going to change the sports department's approach even once, and let's hope that sooner rather than later that the COVID-19 stuff is behind us. But talk some more about that. How do you think that's going to change your approach?
Well, you know, I have a pretty specific plan for it, and I've discussed it with the staff and with management, and everybody agrees, because when we started this program of writing features, when we had no games to cover, I told them before that the sports page is going to be better read, it's going to be more interesting, and it's going to be more fun to put together. And it turned out all those three things were true. So, for example, on a given day, we might cover 5 high school baseball games or softball games and have no features in the paper. And it's because we've covered so many games. Everyone's gotten used to us using our resources to be at the game. And then we'll have a guy in the office who is a workaholic, who knows every coach in the world, has cell phone numbers, emails. Any games we're not covering, we have a list, and he gets them. He calls them, he tracks them down. And we're going to see more of that kind of coverage on the game stories. And we're going to be writing these features more, because I want the mix that we should have had all along, but we didn't have the manpower to do it. Well, we're going to designate the manpower to do that. And we may hear some complaints. Why weren't you out covering this game or that game? Well, it's in the paper. We had you score, and we had the highlights. So it's not going to be ignored. It will be accounted for, but it is definitely going to be accounted for in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing that I hadn't thought of. That, you know, of course, there's going to be tons of changes from all of us, I'm sure. I don't think society is ever going to be exactly the way we were, but I think that's really interesting, because I just think those stories, you know, those feature stories, people, you know, that's what people, they just love to see that, you know what I mean?
Well, and we're trying to get away from coronavirus related feature stories.
Yeah, and I wanted to
It's
ask you that.
amazing
How
that
tough is that?
it's tough, because everything right now is affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, you have to bring it up during an interview. What are you doing? How is this affected? Here's an example. I think it's for Wednesday's paper. I have a story scheduled with interview that I had with Artevius Smith. He was a safety on the ETSU football team, and up until this season, he was just an average player, and he was an All-American as a senior. And he's been contacted by NFL teams, and he's got a slight chance of getting drafted and a decent chance of getting into camp as a free agent. So I was talking to him. The Packers are one of the teams that contacted him, by my team. So I had to ask him, you know, how's this affecting you? Because right now, they were talking about moving the draft. They've cut off personal interviews with the players. The players can't do any more workouts for scouts, and the draft is going to be done virtually right now. Nobody wants to do the draft, but the commissioner wants to do it on time. So I had to ask him about that, and you know, he said he didn't really concern himself about anything he can't control. So he's just ready to get out there and show what he can do. I hope he does. But you know, that's really every story right now is coronavirus related, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and I guess that's like from a high school feature on up. I guess, you know, it's just Part of it.
But the key is to not make every story saying that here's how Don Armstrong is spending his time now that he has, you got to find something.
Yeah.
For example, in Sunday's paper, I had a Quay Holmes feature, and I thought it was really interesting that he was staying in Johnson City during this because he didn't want to go home. He's ETSU running back, by the way, for those of you who don't know. He's a sophomore, really well-spoken kid, and he's a really nice guy. He's staying in Johnson City because he has a 3-month-old brother, and he didn't want to risk bringing anything home. And he had some other brothers and sisters too, but I thought that was neat. So I focused on that he was staying home for the safety of his family. That's the kind of thing that, while it's coronavirus related, it still was interesting to read.
Yeah. Well, I still have a couple of more, but I wanted to ask, anybody else have a question for Joe? Justin, I see you're on here. I know you write athletics for the East Tennessee, and I'd love for you to think of a question for Joe.
Yes, sir, I do. Sorry, I got in here a little bit late. Gosh, I guess I'm just most interested in hearing a little bit more about your creation of your own topics moving forward in the short term. If you could, I guess, just expand on that a little bit, talk a little bit about how do you go about planning that sort of thing? Like, we could be in this for weeks or several months. Are we going to run out of topics soon, or do we just have to keep moving forward without, trying to mention the COVID as little as possible and still talk about our personal sports experiences a little bit?
That's a really good question, because we wonder the same thing too. I mean, if this goes on 3 months, I've told some of my friends, let me know if your 5-year-old son's outside with a baseball. I'm gonna come by and do a feature on it. And I hope it doesn't get to that. But what I told Don before we went on, that some of my staff, there's 3 of us that have over 100 years experience doing this combined. We know a lot of people. We've been through a lot of things, and it's just amazing how one story talking to somebody will jog my memory to 3 or 4 ideas. And I keep a list, and it's not unusual for me to be just doing nothing. And an idea comes to my head, and I just shoot myself a text, and it's right there on my phone. And then I'm able to add it to my list when I can. Really, I don't think we'll run out of ideas, but you never know. What I've really tried to stay away from is, and I see other papers and outlets doing this, is just rehashing old stories. Now, we do some features on things from the past, but we've not gotten to the point where we just have to copy and paste an old story and say, blast from the past, read this. Because we don't want you to read the sports page just for the sake of reading it. We're still trying to provide you with some content. And those ideas keep coming up. I've told my guys, talk to people, even if it's not somebody that you're going to get a story about. They might know somebody, and it's amazing how those ideas spread. They just keep popping up into our heads, and I think I could do it. I think I could do it indefinitely, and the key for us though is to make it somewhat interesting, and not just be writing for the sake of writing. I don't know if you were on when I was talking about the master story I'm working on, but that is something that where we have to create our own content. And I've talked to my staff about maybe us putting together a big old column on our favorite professional moments, doing our job, that kind of stuff too. But for the time being, I've stressed to my guys, people, write about people. People want to read about people. People like calling people, saying, I saw you in the paper, I read about you online. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to stress, is just writing about people.
Awesome.
I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I did catch that a little bit about the Masters, and I published a little bit online for a couple of baseball articles for a digital website, and I'm kind of in the same boat as far as personally, pulling away like a personal experience and trying to make it as relatable as possible for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm saving the master story for Thursday, because that would have been the first day.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, Justin. You have other question or anything, Justin? If not, I can ask another one.
Oh no, I'm good for now. I'll keep thinking of something, but
Okay,
thank
all right.
you.
Well, thank you very much, Justin. That was a very good question. Thanks,
Yes,
Joe,
it
for
was.
your answer.
It was, and it was something we thought about. And honestly, some of us are going to run out of ideas before others. And we have a younger reporter on our staff, and he's not been quite as fortunate coming up with them. So he's been getting some assignments. You know, I've left it up to the other guys, you know, to come up with them.
That kind of, you talk about that mention of a younger reporter kind of brings to mind. I mean, Joe, you and I have both been in this business quite a while, especially to be such very young men that we are. But anyway, yeah. How do you
Speak for yourself.
how do you when you think about some of the challenges and just kind of the uniqueness overall of what we see from a journalism standpoint, how does this stack up is what I'm trying to say. Is this like the to you, is it the biggest, most challenging sort of thing in your career? Or?
Well, you know, like I said earlier, some of the people that weren't there, when I began my career, I used a manual typewriter. So to think that I'm doing this right now would, you know, would blow my mind. You thought that I might have been on the moon by now doing this. I don't know. You know, it's just crazy. But all that stuff, all the technology, the internet, all this stuff that has changed the business so much has come incrementally, and we could see it coming. There's never been something that blew our mind from one day to the next, but this did that. This changed it. You know, it changed every business in the world. It didn't just change ours, but you know, the sports world stopped. And when you're writing about sports for a living, it scares you. It makes you wonder what you're going to do. That's why we took the proactive response, and we didn't sit around thinking, what next? We went out and attacked it. And I think, honestly, I think it might have saved our jobs. It at least kept us relevant. But yeah, all the changes from manual typewriters to high-speed internet to Zoom, all that stuff kind of came a little at a time. Like I said, from one day to the next, you never got surprised. You say, oh, something new to try. But there was you never got hit over the head with a sledgehammer like we did about a month ago. And that's what this is like, just getting hit over the head with a sledgehammer. And I guess we could have just laid there flat like a cartoon character. Well, I guess the cartoon character just shakes his head, jumps up and shakes it off. That's what we're trying to do right now.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That's a great answer. I also wanted to ask you, some of my students who have continued to write have said that they have found it to be somewhat therapeutic, somewwhat of a way to help them during this time. From a personal standpoint, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it is, because for one thing, I'm enjoying it more because I'm able to be a little more creative because I'm not looking at a game. And, you know, we still did some of the other stuff, but really during basketball season, I'm locked in. They play in 3 games a week. So I'm writing 3 previews, 3 game stories, and maybe a feature, but not many features. I'm trying to do them, but we've been more creative. And maybe that aspect of it has made it therapeutic for me, but I'm enjoying it more. I'm enjoying the actual writing. I got a spot on my back porch. I go outside, it's screened in, and even when it was cold last month, I had it covered in plastic. I just took it down, and that's basically my office when unless it's 12 degrees, but I got a space heater out there. But I sit out there and, you know, basically in my own world. And yeah, therapeutic's a good way to put it.
What do you, well, of course we can't really, I mean, it's tough to speculate, but do you, and you might know a little bit more about this, and I'm not as well versed on this aspect of it, like the high school sports, I guess all of that for spring, I guess those are gone, right? I mean, is that?
Not yet.
No?
They're still, I mean, it's like everything else. Everything, you know, almost every sentence that we say these days should end with the word tentatively. Everything, you know, unless maybe you're hungry or something. Right now, they have not canceled the high school sports. They still hope to, and they said that the TSSAA in Tennessee has announced that the regular season, which is used to seed the district tournaments, is not necessary to have a district tournament. Coaches can get together and seed the tournament however they want, make pairings however they want, if they do indeed just jump right to that at the end of the season, which technically they still can because they've not canceled. If there's one thing your people should learn during this whole thing, is that words matter. And there is a huge difference between the word postponed and the word canceled. And everybody doesn't know the difference between those two. Yeah. When you say canceled, it's over. When you say postponed, there's a glimmer of hope that you're going to have it again later. And that they've even used suspended for some of these sports. But for example, the British Open announced they were going to cancel it last week. The golf world went crazy. They came back the next day, said, we're still looking for alternative dates. So they actually used the word canceled, and they meant to say postponed. Well, that being said, while we've been talking here, I got a little blip on my phone that just said British Open canceled. So I think they did indeed cancel it. But now the high school sports are still hoping to play. I doubt they will, but they're hoping.
Yeah. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the high school basketball, were they still in the middle of their state tournament, or is that?
The girls' tournament was going on as everything got suspended, postponed, and the boys' tournament had not started yet. Because in Tennessee, the girls go 1 week and the boys go the following week. And the boys' teams were getting ready, and they were still hoping to resume those basketball tournaments, which was really going to be screwy because some of the basketball players were already playing baseball because baseball had started. They canceled the basketball tournaments, yet they were still playing baseball outside. And then they postponed. I did it. I said cancel. I know. I just caught myself. It's easy to do.
Let's see.
So,
I have let's see. Oh, another question sent to me through the chat here, and asking this on behalf of Raina Wiseman, the executive editor at the East Tennessean. How do you think writing throughout this crisis benefits young journalists?
I don't know if it really benefits anybody because, well, I'll tell you what, if you can come up with stories that are not coronavirus stories, because so much of our news, and it just has to be because, really our job is to inform people of what's going on. And, a lot of it is dealing with numbers and percentages. So I don't know how it can be beneficial to really anybody, but just other than proving your worth, I guess that's what I would say. For all of us, everybody has had to prove your worth. And honestly, the people writing in the news department, they're writing about more serious stuff than we are. So I think they've done okay.
Mm-hmm. How does, from the athletics world, how often has let me see how to pose this. How often has your work in the athletics department ended up now more in the news side? I mean,
it right now it could be interchangeable. We had one of our guys write a story about the wrestlers from David Crockett High School doing some work. I think it was with a food bank, and that ended up in the news section and not the sports section. So yeah, a lot of it can be interchangeable because like I said, we're writing about people more than sports. And we put it in the sports page if it's a person that is sports related, but it certainly can go in the news section. But right now they got their hands full too. So, writing about just what. I'll tell you one thing. I've started. There's been a lot of times in my stories where I've written about how the sports world has halted. And I have not even described in a story a couple of times why the sports world has been halted, because I think everybody knows.
Yeah.
And I'm getting tired of writing that word. I had a doctor's appointment on Friday, my doctor came in and said, I have to ask you this. Have you heard of the coronavirus? I'm so tired of writing that word.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I have a question that's not
Okay, Trish.
coronavirus related.
Yes.
This is not related to that. I'm sure that you're being a sports fan, obviously, probably kind of helped guide you to the profession you're in. But has your work influenced anything? Has it been opposite? Has your work influenced you as a fan?
You know, I've always said that my one of my strengths is I can separate that. First of all, everyone says, "Oh, you got to be rooting for the Bucks when you're covering it." You know, I root for the story, and obviously, when I'm writing for the Johnson City Press and ETSU wins, it's a better story. So, I'm not sad to see them win, but you know, I honestly can say that I do separate my fandom from my professional responsibilities. A lot of people don't. I you know, I did get into this because I like sports. You know, when you're young and they start paying you to go to baseball games, to basketball games, you start like pinching yourself. I'm getting paid. I used to. I covered Bristol Motor Speedway. I covered 40 races in a row before we hired one of the best NASCAR writers in the country. And while I was not a huge NASCAR fan, I'd be sitting in there thinking, you know, there's people paying $100 to sit here, and they're paying me to be here. They're feeding me to be here. They're introducing me to the participants. So this is pretty good. But I've always separated myself. I covered UT football when Peyton Manning was there. You know, I've never got an autograph. I've never done, and I've seen it when Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer and Gary Player were in Bristol playing for an event that raised like $14 million. Some of the local media were getting their press passes autographed, and I was cringing about that. You get that kind of access because you're a professional, and you shouldn't take advantage of that kind of stuff. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I did not I've never let my being a fan affect the way I cover something or even the way I feel about it.
This is a little bit along the lines of just brings to mind after Trish asked that, and again, and we have some aspiring young journalists on this conversation today. What advice or what pieces of advice, and again, not COVID related, but just overall, I mean, somebody entering the world. I mean, I know the world of media, I mean, my goodness, it changes so often. I mean, maybe not quite as abruptly as what we've seen in the last few weeks, but just some advice you could offer.
Well, the advice I can give, it's the same advice that I got X amount of years ago. Like, notice how I'm not saying how many years ago. I'll tell you, these are things that might not be always adhered to by everybody, but I'll tell you what I adhere to when you're writing a story, to use as few words as you can to tell any portion of it. Wordiness just kind of gets muddled and clumsy. Don't use 10 words when you could convey exactly the same point with 5 words, because I'm telling you, people appreciate brevity, and you can make your point quicker. People read it easier. That's honest to goodness. That's my absolute number one goal when I'm writing, is to not be worried. Also, when you're just coming up in the business, write as much as you can. Write for whoever you can, whoever will hire you, whoever will publish you, even if you don't get paid. Get those clips, get practice writing, because it really is an acquired talent. The more you do it, the better you get at it. I guarantee you my writing today is better than it was X amount of years ago. I look back at some of the stuff that I've done, and I'm not one. that saved every clip I've written. But because of the internet, I can find some stories I wrote back in the 1980s. And I kind of giggle at it. And actually, most of the time I look at it, and I'm kind of surprised that it's not as bad as I thought it would be when I look back. But that's my biggest advice. Write as much as you can and be as brief as you can. It doesn't mean write a story in 50 words. We still write 400 or 500 words, but get to the point. Make your point and stick to your point. Don't meander all over the place. That's about the best advice I can give you.
Very good. The other thing, also along those same lines, the athletics world has kind of now when it's operating what used to be normal anyway, a unique deadline pressure that sometimes you see in news, but it's almost always the case in sports because games typically take place at night and you usually have to get them written pretty close to the conclusion of that. What are some tips and how have you learned to kind of handle some of those, those deadline pressures?
Well, what's amazing is not too many years ago, our deadlines were pretty reasonable. I'll tell you, the deadlines used to be at the press. Our pages had to go at 12:15, and then we could do a makeover within 2 a.m. We'd have 2 editions. Now my copy deadline is 10 p.m. And not only copy, but that includes photos, and then we have to do videos too, because we are multimedia journalists now. And when you're watching a game, I'll go through what I do usually when I'm at an ETSU game. I sit on the court and take pictures. We have no photographers anymore. We are our own photographers. And I'll take pictures until halftime. And I'll spend the 10 minutes of halftime downloading, editing, and sending pictures into the computer system at work. The second half, I turn myself into a writer. And I start really paying attention at what's going on. I look at the halftime stats. And the stories, when you're covering a game, generally a story writes itself. If you've been doing it a long time, you know what's happening. It's in your head. And you can, because of that Associated Press experience I had with the payphone and everything that I talked about before, I'm able to do it quick. But, there's sometimes when I got 5 minutes and you can't write, a 12, 15, 18-inch game story in 5 minutes. You have to have some stuff written as the game's going on. And sometimes you got to rip it all up because the last 2 minutes of the game change your whole story. So that's the big thing. You said the games are at night. Here's a funny thing. During football season, high school football is king. And Friday night is a madhouse. Don can attest to this because he used to work with me doing that.
Yes.
It's an absolute madhouse. The phones, the emails, us tracking down coaches. And on election night, the newsroom is a madhouse. But they treat it like it's a huge deal. They order pizzas and they make a big deal out of it. But we have election night every week on Friday night. And I'm telling you, that's every bit as hectic as election night. And then during basketball season, we do it every Tuesday and every Friday. And we do for boys games and girls games in basketball. So, the deadline's crazy. You have to get it done because there's a chain of work going on behind you. If you're late, the paper gets printed late. The carriers are waiting around. They're paying overtime to the pressmen, the guys that run the press. So you being late gets in a lot of trouble, and you hear about it. So the deadline really is not a suggestion, and it's a lot of pressure.
I've done a lot of talking. Do you have any other questions from some of the folks here on our conversation? And it's okay if there's not, but I just wanted to make the offer. I had a quick, you mentioning UT football, and this probably will bore some of the other people, but it always reminds me, and I'm sure you remember this. I wasn't exactly young, but I was still really young to the profession. And Joe was covering UT football, and I was able to go along with him for just to kind of get the experience. And this was the you can probably help me out on the year on this, Joe. It was when it was the national championship year, the year the UT won the national championship.
Yep.
What was it? Was that 98?
98, I think.
Yeah. And I know you know what I'm talking about. I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
It's the only UT game I've ever been to in my life. I mean, and I was there just as, I'm not really a UT fan or anything of that nature, but I was just there just to kind of get to the gist of the profession. I mean, Joe was kind of letting me be along just to kind of take it all in. Well, UT had this game lost. I mean, it was over. I mean, there was like maybe a minute left. And I remember clearly.
All Arkansas had to do was take a knee and run out the clock. They did not have to run a play.
And I remember clearly they were playing Arkansas, and Joe told me, he said, okay, as soon as this ends, you go to the Arkansas locker room and you get the quotes for me from there. And we'd already gone down to the sidelines, because like the last 2 minutes you're allowed to do that or something like that. And so, and I was all pumped for that. And then, pardon the expression, but then all hell broke loose. I mean, what was the quarterback? I forget his name.
Clint Sterner.
Yeah. He
just fumbled.
Yeah, just dropped the ball. I mean, nobody touched him. And it was just, and see, UT of course recovered, and I think ran it in.
Yeah, they ended up running it in, and that was an undefeated season.
Yeah,
and that was a game they should not have won.
Yeah,
without that, they would have never played in the Fiesta Bowl for the national championship.
No, and I'm just professionally, personally, I always will remember that, just because I kind of thought, wow, is this what it's like every week?
Well, and that's where it really pays to separate yourself from the sports fan to the professional sports writer, because I guarantee you there were some media members jumping up and down and running across the field when that game ended. But
oh yeah, I'm sure. And I think I probably was, but not because I was not that I was rooting. I still realized, but that was just such.
It was strange.
It was amazing. I mean, it left me. It was, and I kind of thought, and now I also say, because I always say from a fan standpoint, I'm not really a Tennessee football fan, but I'm always like, why would I ever want to go to another game? I mean, because I don't think it's ever going to be like that.
Yeah. That was 22 years ago.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And you were the only young reporter there.
Yeah. But that was my first experience with like being in the big time college football environment, and that was fantastic. So that was a really long way of me saying I've always appreciated Joe taking me along on that, because it's given me a story to tell so many times, as I just did again.
And you've always told me you never want to go back.
No reason. Yeah. All right. Do you have any other questions? Joe's been with us almost an hour.
Thank you, Joe.
I guess I have one brief question.
Yes, please go for it.
Could you dive in a little bit more about the etiquette of being a press reporter and attending the game, other than just separating yourself from being a fan? Is there anything else that I could do as a young aspiring reporter attending a game? Like I attended the championship game, for example, a few weeks ago. Is there anything else that I could be looking out for to do, other than, not looking for autographs or anything like that?
Yeah. There's a lot of the schools that I cover, they make an announcement. They especially do this in football, and in basketball sometimes it's written on your nameplate on your seat by the press table, but they'll say something like, the Football Writers of America remind everybody in here this is a working press box, and cheering will not be tolerated. Any violators will be asked to find the nearest exit. So I've seen people pump their fist, pound the table, and we're all human. So if an incredible play happens, it's okay to have a reaction. Like I'd yell wow, or oh my God, but never I remember a media member from our market was on the sideline once as a Tennessee player was running up the sideline on a punt return, and he was literally pumping his fist, yelling, "Go, go, go, go." I would highly recommend you don't do that. You know, it's like have a poker face. That's what I always try to do. I'm there working, and you know, I might raise an eyebrow, look at somebody, but you know, as far as etiquette, just you know, cheering is not tolerated, and it really isn't, and it shouldn't be. And sometimes, you know, somebody will bring their kids and sit at the press table, and it's distracting. We're there to work, and some places realize that, and some places don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Justin.
Yes, there was. You've had a couple good ones.
Any other questions for Mr. Avento?
You know, I got to tell them something real quick.
Sure, go for it.
I've been writing sports for more years than twice of some of your ages, and in all my career, I've heard from readers certain ways, emails, phone calls. But for the past year and a half, I've been writing a monthly column on my bloodhound and the adventures of Daisy Duke. I have gotten more response to my Daisy Duke columns than all the sports writing I've done in my entire career combined. Think of that. Daisy Duke, I get 20, 30 emails about Daisy Duke. People just, it resonates with people. They just read about the stupid things my bloodhound does. The one who was in yesterday's paper was how much Daisy Duke does not like social distancing. So I always get some good pictures of her too. So that's what. So I spent my entire career building it as a sports writer, and for 80% of the people that know me now, I'm the guy that writes about the dog.
Oh,
Which is okay.
Yeah, so that's a kind of a roundabout way of you saying be flexible in this business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and write what you know sometimes.
I'm not only flexible. We got an advertiser to come aboard just to advertise on the Daisy Duke page. So
oh wow.
In that regard, Daisy Duke's paying my salary.
Yeah, I say that makes that very valuable right there.
Very. Kind of keeps me around a little longer too, maybe.
The one last thing, and just because you know, we've talked about how you've been in this business a while, how do you use social media, and how has that kind of evolved as far as you know, your career's gone along? Like, how are you using it now?
Well, you know, I'll even take it a step back. I'll tell you about the internet. You know, the fact that everybody now has access to every bit of news at their fingertips is killing newspapers. So sometimes we're sitting around and we're researching a story. You know, I have the world of information at my fingertips. So the same thing that's killing us is helping us. So that being said, we're able to know a lot more now, but it's also hurting advertising. Specifically, social media, we are all obligated to have professional accounts and try to use our social media to drive readership toward our website. I also use it to contact people. The world's so much smaller now. I told you I talked to TJ Cromer from ETSU basketball a couple of weeks ago. He's playing in Italy. I sent him a Facebook message and able to get in touch with him. I talked to Johnny Campbell, a former ETSU soccer player who's playing professionally in a lockdown in Cambodia. I mean, you know, without social media, I would not have been able to do that, get a hold of those guys that way. So I use it as a contact tool more than anything, really. I got a hold of Artevia Smith through Twitter message. So
all right. Well, thanks for that, Joe. And let's see. Well, I guess, wow, it looks like we're almost right at time. And so I don't want to keep you any longer than what I asked, because I'm sure your dogs have been really quiet. So I'm sure they probably
have.
Yeah.
Right.
So they probably are about ready for some attending to, I would think. So. But anyway, Joe, first I want to thank everybody who's been in on the conversation. I appreciate the questions. And Joe, I cannot say how much I appreciate you taking the time and sharing COVID-related experiences and ones that are not related, you know, during this challenging time.
We got off that subject for a while. That was kind of refreshing.
That actually was nice. Yeah. So, All right. Well, Joe, again, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.
All right,
Thanks.
Don.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks. Good luck to everybody. Anybody needs to get a hold of me, you can find my email.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Dawn.
Bye, Don.